Exemplifies that. He is the New York Times best-selling author of 11, they have question marks here. I'm pretty sure he wrote one or two books just while we were at the conference today. So maybe that's up to 13 now. Those include Meltdown and the Politically Incorrect Guide to American History with Professor Guzman. He also wrote the Activist Handbook for Our Generation, Nullification, How to Resist Federal Tyranny in the 21st Century. He is a senior fellow at the Ludwig von Mises Institute, holding a bachelor degree in history from Harvard and a master's and a PhD from Columbia. Did you see Obama at Columbia? Because there is some dispute about that. Maybe you can tell us about that. He really is one of the most interesting men in the world. Please welcome Tom Woods.
God love you people for being so patient and staying all day and, your whole beautiful Saturday doing this. I mean, we need people like this who have priorities like that. Because I bet tomorrow will also be a beautiful day, right? I hope. Then otherwise I'll feel guilty. But I was thinking the other day, I've been to 44 states in the Union. I haven't necessarily spoken in all of them, but I've visited 44 states. It'll be 45 next month when I get to Montana. But I was honestly, as I was heading down here, I was thinking, which state have I been to in my various speaking engagements most often? And hands down, it's Texas. It's not even close. Whereas, you'd be surprised. My home state of Massachusetts, I haven't actually gotten that many invites. Breaking my heart here. Well, the description of the event says that I'll be talking about my book, Nullification, so I feel less guilty and self-promotional actually doing that, given that that's what Michael put on there. But I want to start off by mentioning that I have 4 little girls, ages 1, 5, 6, and just about 8. And my just about 8-year-old, who's just about 8 going on 58, she reads constantly, she's like a sponge, she's got a memory like you wouldn't believe, she wants to learn, she's dying to learn things. She wants to know about this world, and she wants to know what is in her father's books. She wants to read them, and she knows the words, but can't, of course she's too little for this. And I keep having to tell her, well, when you get a little older, you can read my books and we can talk. And she is so unsatisfied with that. And she said, no, I can understand it, just explain it to me. So I picked this book up and I thought to myself, let's see, can I explain nullification to a 7-year-old? And I did it. And here's how I did it. I said, okay, so she knows that we have, a government in Washington and all that. I said, okay, so when they set that up, they made a list of things it could do, because they didn't want it to be able to do just anything it wanted. They gave it a list of things that it was allowed to do. And I kid you not, as if anticipating my next point, she actually said, well, what if they do something not on that list? Glad you asked. See? That's what nullification is. That's when the states say, now wait a minute, we didn't put this on that list, so we're not going to let you do it. And immediately this appealed to her sense of natural justice. Well, of course. And it immediately occurred to me, if we had a panel of 7-year-olds, it might actually be better than the Supreme Court. All right, so we talk about nullification, and we get scolded for this. How dare we talk about this? This is not a mainstream idea. Oh, no, well, gee, it's not a mainstream idea. You know what is a mainstream idea? Having entitlement programs that are underfunded by an amount that is greater than twice the GDP of the entire world. That's mainstream. That's what the mainstream has gotten us. You know what's mainstream? The TSA sticking its hands in your pants. That's mainstream. Oh, good heavens. Oh, I'm not in that glorious spectrum from Joe Biden to Mitch McConnell. Oh, forgive me. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, my goodness, I can't believe how uppity I've become. And incidentally, I was just talking to Robert Scott Bell, whom you heard from earlier, and he was telling me that the one time he actually got singled out to go through the radiation scanner at the airport, he said, well, I'm not going to go through that thing. And he actually said to the TSA agents, don't you people care about how much radiation you might being exposed to at this very minute? And I am not joking. The woman said, well, look, you're going to die of something. And Robert at that point figured, you know what, there's no way I could possibly debate you. That's your position. Well, so recently, there's a website that probably most of us don't visit, thank heavens, called Talking Points Memo. Exquisitely mainstream, not a forbidden opinion to be found within a million miles of Talking Points Memo. And they ran an article not long ago called The Normalization of Nullification. And they weren't exactly cheering this development, by the way. Oh my gosh, they were shocked. How dare we peons hold an opinion that we haven't run by them first? Who do we think we are? I mean, the attitude's incredible. The elitism was totally on display for everybody to see. Then not long after that, we had this little tirade by Rachel Maddow, the great constitutional scholar on MSNBC, who of course said that, anybody who wants to talk about this is a sinister person with bad intentions, because no one in Washington is a sinister person with bad intentions. This is the cream of the crop. These are the best people in our whole society. They're just trying to look out for the common good. How dare you suspect that? And yet, while all this is going on and all this criticism is taking place, yet the idea is seeping into the public consciousness. And the other day I was told that New York Law School, which I believe is the oldest private law school in New York, is offering a course next year on constitutional history, supremacy or nullification. Now, I think I know where the typical law professor will come down on this, but they weren't talking about this 3 years ago. They weren't offering a course on this 3 years ago. Suddenly, they're talking about it, even though, by and large, it has been blacked out by right-of-center radio and television people. You can almost name any radio, television person you can think of, right-of-center, almost all of them. There are honorable exceptions. Almost all of them, it's like this word doesn't even exist. They're not. It's like this is not happening. It's like we're not in this room, but yet here we are, right? And here we are, and we've brought together all different types of people, because we've got 9/12 groups that co-sponsored, and Tea Party groups, and Campaign for Liberty, and WeRefuse.com, and the 10th Amendment Center, and the Foundation for a Free Society, and all down the list. And these are groups that don't always agree with each other on everything, but we do agree on this fundamental issue, and we are natural allies, and we should remain friends and learn from each other. Here we are. It's all going on in spite of the fact that when it is mentioned, it's either mentioned in a way that's hostile, or it's not mentioned at all by people you would think would be its friends, but who turn out to basically believe that federal supremacy is the way to go, because eventually we'll be in charge of the federal government, and then we'll make sure and get everything done our way. Well, somehow it never seems to work out, does it? Even when our alleged people get in, the thing still gets worse. Yeah, it's true, we're not going over the cliff at 200 miles an hour under our people. We're going over it at like 180. So we're supposed to be appeased by this. Now, when I did this book, when I decided to write Nullification, I wrote it because I had written about nullification in the past because I'm a U.S. historian, and that's what I do. I write about old things. And I've written about it and given speeches about it just because it's an old thing, and I'm a historian, and I talk about old things. And then, all of a sudden, like 2 years ago, I noticed that there were Tea Party groups that were linking to my videos on nullification, but they were not treating it as an old thing. They were taking St. Augustine's dictum, but ever ancient, ever new. That, wow, hey, maybe we could use this today. And I thought, oh my gosh, I never thought this would happen. So I thought, well, look, anytime you talk about this, or the states at all, that maybe power should be dispersed and the state should, you are going to be condemned and smeared and criticized. So I thought, people are going to need every argument that exists in the arsenal. They need every historical, constitutional, moral argument in order to be able to stand up to the New York Times and all the commissars of approved opinion of the modern-day Pravdas that we have in our society. So I wanted to put this together. But not just so that people could win arguments, but also so that we, as Americans, we could understand our country better. You can't really fully understand American history when half the history has fallen down the Orwellian memory hole. The remainder doesn't make any sense. You've got to dig down and pull that history back up. Now, Kevin has already given, basically, more or less, the case for nullification. I'll just give it just a very brief version. Basically, it runs like this. And then, of course, there's much more that can be... Obviously, there's a longer version of this, but the really short version is, okay, the states create the federal government. I can defend that statement. So therefore, the states are the ultimate units. They begin first. First you have the states, then you have the federal government. Like first you have the bride and groom, then you have the marriage. You don't first have a marriage and then that gives birth to the bride and groom. First you have the bride and groom, that gives rise to the marriage. The states give rise to the union. The peoples of the states are the sovereigns in the American system. No government is sovereign in the American system. We don't say the federal government is sovereign. No, that's the old world European view that Americans fled from. The peoples of the states are the sovereigns. And so therefore, in the last resort, after all the courts, which Jefferson believed the federal courts would just be rubber stamps of the federal government, which they have turned out to be, after all the courts have heard all your appeals and everything, in the last resort, the parties to the Constitution, as Madison put it, the states, the peoples of the states themselves must have the power to intervene and say, now wait a minute, no, we can't let you exercise this power because we as the creators never intended you to have it. Because that's what the principal-agent relationship consists of. You don't ask your agent, hey, did I intend to give you this power that you're exercising? That makes no sense. You don't ask you're the one who gave it. You ask yourself that question. And that's ultimately what is supposed to happen. The proper disputants in a situation like that are the states themselves as they review their own intentions and the original understanding of the peoples of the states at the time of the ratifying. Okay, so this is not any crazy idea. This is the most simple common sense. Now, there's a common theme that I'd like to point out here. And I hope you won't walk away thinking, I can't believe what a self-promotional jerk this guy is. I mean, honestly, I'm not, but I have been shut out of the media for rather a while, so I have only you guys to help me out. So when I write something, I want to tell people that because I have no social life and therefore have an awful lot of free time in my hands, I have indeed written another book since Nullification. And it's this one called Rollback, and you'll notice that they both have Obama on the cover. Now, but in this case, Obama's face is the word nullification is stamped on it, kind of clever. And here, Obama's sitting here, signing something, and then the picture peels back, and you can see the Constitution behind it, like we're peeling him back with the Constitution. Well, on the audiobook version of these books, I think they were totally tone deaf because. The audiobook version, the cover has, the word isn't here, the cover has got all these people, and then at the very top it says nullification, so it looks like nullification, what Obama does. It's exactly the wrong message to send. And then secondly, for the audiobook of Rollback, there's no peeling back to show the it's just a picture of Obama. Rolling back government, that's what Obama does all day and night. Good thing I don't sell any audiobooks, basically, or people would be completely confused. All right, well, anyway, the common theme that I want to drive at here between these two books, that what I'm doing in Rollback, basically, is arguing against the idea that, oh gosh, if we ever did have to cut the budget, well, we'd all be dead in a ditch at the side of the road, because where would we be if Joe Biden weren't watching over us all the time and all that? You get that all the time, right? Like, you guys have got to be ready to answer when people say to you, well, this Tea Party view of the U.S., well, this would be terrible because we'd have no this, we'd have no that, all the consumer products would be exploding in our faces, and we wouldn't have any science, and all our art would be gone because every artist would put down his paintbrush if it weren't for Joe Biden up there looking over. You had to be sort of ready to answer this. And the common theme is that just as with nullification, we're sort of told that if federal supremacy were ever to go away, if power were ever seriously to be restored to the state, this would be terrible. Oh, where would we be? Oh, it would be awful, awful. Well, likewise, when we talk about, well, gee, we've got to roll back the government. Again, where would we be? Where would you poor souls be? What a bunch of pathetic boobs and saps you'd be if the political class in Washington weren't there at every moment to watch over you and provide all these wonderful services. Well, let me just give you the lightning round version of just a few of these things. And basically what I'm kind of doing in Rollback is I start off talking about, okay, Obama's a bad president. Okay, because that's sort of like the red meat. Everybody goes for that these days. Yeah, Obama's a bad president. But you know what? If we were just dealing with one bad president, that would be one thing. But unfortunately, we've had like a long string of them. It's not just like all of a sudden one day, out of nowhere, we got Obama. It just goes from, there's a continuum here. So so the Obamacare, here's what we should have done instead, and the stimulus spending, here are the arguments against it, whatever. But then, okay, we get that out of our system. Now I want to go through and just start peeling away, layer after layer. Saying, I am so much beyond just, we got to repeal Obama. We got so much more to do than that. And so, for example, just take a simple but yet a sort of example that I think would stump a lot of people. It would have stumped me not too long ago. Let's just take a quick example. It's supposed to be a lightning round here. So back to the lightning round. Okay, lightning round, science. Okay, we'd have no science if it weren't for the government spending the money on the scientists and all that. We'd all be doing rain dances, whatever. We'd all be worshiping the thunder god or something if it weren't for government science programs and all this. Okay, there's a long refutation of that, but the quick one is, okay, let's look at Britain. Britain in the 19th century is the most wealthy and industrialized country in the world, home to its most illustrious scientists. And you know how much government support of science there was? This much. Nothing. France and Germany had a lot of government support for science, and they were way behind Britain. Now, suppose it had been the reverse. Suppose France and Germany had been way ahead of Britain, and Britain had lagged behind. Well, we would never hear the end of, well, you see, if you don't spend money on science, government money, you're going to be way behind like Britain. But when Britain is way ahead, what do we hear? Crickets. No response at all. We're not even to acknowledge it. Japan has the most privatized research and development in the whole world. And they engage in a tremendous amount of what's called basic science, except it takes place in industrial laboratories rather than in tax-funded universities. Or, again, the arts. Oh, we have no art, and apparently we didn't have any art until 1965 when we got the National Endowment for the Arts. Before that, there was no art in the U.S. Well, of course, what these government art agencies do is what they promote are people who are good at filling out government grant applications, not people who actually happen to be good artists. You might have noticed that, by the way, that this is not actually promoting the best art, since the Florentine Renaissance, right? I mean, this is not exactly the greatest art in the history of mankind. But the key thing is, how much do they spend on the National Endowment for the Arts? I mean, over the years, it's barely topped $200 million. Well, private funding for the arts, voluntary funding for the arts, has been in the billions for years. Does anybody even know that? Well, no, basically nobody knows that, because we're all fed the line that if we were a free people, we'd have nothing. Every wall would be bare, there'd be no murals, I don't even know if anybody would produce paint and all this. or foreign aid. Oh, everybody would be starving in the world if it weren't for U.S. foreign aid programs. Well, to the contrary, the foreign aid programs have made things worse in almost every single case. I would support foreign aid only if I hated the human race. I said that on TV. I was on Fox News at one time promoting a book, and I said that. And somebody started a whole Facebook group called I Would Support Foreign Aid Only If I Hated the Human Race. I mean, if you look at all these World Bank and whatever, all these programs, and all they do is they prop up the very regimes that are impoverishing their people. In Africa, there is a word in Swahili, Wabenzi, and it means men of the Mercedes-Benz. It's a reference to the political class that drives around in these fancy cars while people are crawling around in the dirt for sustenance. I mean, they have nothing to show for them. And I've written a lot about foreign aid and why it is that they don't work and why they actually tend to make things worse and why the countries that got cut off from foreign aid typically have done the best. But even on foreign aid, when you think about programs that might actually do something, not giving something to dictator so-and-so. I mean, for goodness sake, there are African leaders who were literally cannibals earlier in the post-colonial period. I mean, that's not the best guy to hand $1 million to. So when you do get money and fresh water, whatever, into the hands of people, who don't eat people, you do see some results when these private groups get in there. And it turns out that Americans, even under the tax burden that they're under, even under the expectation that government is already doing this for them anyway, Americans still give voluntarily, even with all these disabilities, twice as much to these private groups as all U.S. government foreign aid put together. Again, nobody knows that, because again, if it weren't for them doing all this selfless work, where would we all be? I will spare you my thing on the Federal Reserve System, but we'll just say there is more propaganda about the Federal Reserve System than almost everything else in U.S. history combined. oh my goodness, if we didn't, only a crank would have a concern about the Federal Reserve. These are our wise central planners who know exactly where interest rates should be and how much the money supply should be increased and so on and on. And my goodness, how dare you question them? And they really need to be allowed to function in secret. And in fact, when you look at the real data, not the phony baloney data that they produce, but the real data, it turns out the Fed has not given us fewer and shallower recessions. It has not given us increased stability. That when we see economic instability in the 19th century, that's because this was an agricultural society that had harvest failures, and so output tends to fluctuate quite a bit. But in the 20th century, the fluctuations are much more attributable to monetary policy and the Fed. It's not true. All we hear about, oh my goodness, we'd be thrown back into the financial panics of the 19th century. I've spent a lot of time answering that. I have a Federal Reserve chapter in rollback, because if we need to roll back, if we can roll back only one thing, it would be take away the money creation machine from the federal government. Oh, and by the way, isn't it funny that now we get to find out about some of what they were doing, creating money during the bailout period. And of course, we were told we can't tell you where this money went because that would really make the whole system unstable. We can't have people knowing where the money is going. Anytime they give you a phony baloney thing like that, you know they're lying, and they know you know they're lying. So then it turns out, okay, yeah, the Central Bank of Libya really needed an awful lot of money, apparently, it turned out. Now we find out that a couple $100 million went to the wives of a couple major Wall Street firms in a scam that, if it had failed, 90% of the losses would have been eaten by you and me. This is all starting to come out, and it reminds me now, one of the things I did at one time was I gave this testimony in Congress about auditing the Fed, and the one thing I said was, I said this to Barney Frank was in the room, and I said, all the time the federal government, when it's violating our rights, says things like, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. If I stick my hand in your pants, you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. So I said, same thing goes for the Federal Reserve. If they're not doing anything wrong, they got nothing to fear from this audit. Okay, how about poverty? Everybody would be working for $1 a day in a mine if it weren't for the government. And again, I understand. I don't mean to suggest that everybody who believes this is an idiot. If you didn't believe this, I would be surprised. I believed this for the longest time. Didn't people, in fact, in the old days work for very low wages, for very long hours? Doesn't that show that government was the solution to that? Well, I've talked about that also, but just to make this very quick, with regard to poverty, if we look at the beginning of the 20th century, 95% of people live in what we would consider poverty at that point. By the late 1960s, that was down to between 12 and 14%. And that's where it has stagnated ever since. And guess when the major anti-poverty programs began getting major funding? Late 1960s. So the government has almost no role, very, very minor role in fighting poverty before then. And between 1950 and 1968, just the normal functioning of the market led to a reduction in the poverty rate of about 1 percentage point per year. And then it just leaves off from that. So even there, it turns out that we just acting normally, functioning with each other, interacting with each other in the free market, we actually are, once again, are much better at solving these problems than they are. But of course, now we have a system where hundreds of thousands of bureaucrats and social workers and schools of social work and all these outlets benefit from this empire. Whenever we claim that there's some failed federal government program, failed for whom? Not failed for the people who get fat off it, that's for sure. Not failed for the bureaucrats who staff these programs. If it were really a failure from their point of view, it would be gone. We wouldn't just be scratching our heads, I wonder why they continue these ineffectual programs. Now let's consider, let's say, this is the analogy I've been using a lot lately because I just happened upon it one day in a moment of inspiration. It's this. Let's suppose now that kids were educated not in government schools primarily, but in schools that Walmart set up. And now every day they go into their Walmart school, and on the wall they've got all the portraits of the Walmart CEOs over the years. And they're taught to sing songs to the Walmart CEOs, and they hold hands and sway back and forth singing them. And then every year there's one day they set aside where they stay home from school, they meditate about the great deeds of the Walmart CEOs, and wherever would we be without them? Well, we'd all be dead in a ditch, and we'd be working in a mine for $1 a day, and so on. Now, if that were the case, wouldn't we all find this extremely creepy? Wouldn't we say, look, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy this. But on the other hand, hand, when the kids go into the classroom and it's U.S. presidents up on the walls, well, they'll believe anything. Oh, where would we be without President this and that, and we would all be lost. No. You know what? It is beneath the dignity of a free people for us to go on believing this stuff. That's right. If we roll back the scope of government, the size of government, that if we roll back the authority that it has usurped from the states, that we would all be pathetic losers. We cannot believe this anymore. Now, I'm going to conclude by just going through a few things, a few ideas that I think we all need to hold in common here if we're going to move forward. The first thing is, we have to share in common the conviction that we don't care what Rachel Maddow or Chris Matthews, or for that matter, Bill O'Reilly, say about us. We don't care. If they do speak ill of us, we will laugh it off. And some of you already know about this, but every crowd I go to, there are people who haven't heard it yet, so I do want to urge you, if you remember nothing from my remarks today, I want you to commit to memory the website interviewwithazombie.com. Because this is a video that I made knowing that, you come out with a book called Nullification and talk about the states. You know immediately what's going to happen, right? You know immediately what will happen. You're going to be accused of racism and all the usual things. And translation, by the way, means we have absolutely no idea how to answer this guy's arguments, so let's just try to smear him. I mean, of course, we all know that that's what that means. Rachel Maddow saying, oh my goodness, good heavens, if these people had their way, well, all the minorities would be oppressed and so on and on. And I said in a reply to Maddow on the Lou Rockwell blog, I said, well, let's look at the record with regard to minorities that large centralized states had in the 20th century. Were they just super? Why don't you go ask the Armenians in Turkey, or the Ukrainians in the Soviet Union, or the Jews in Germany, or the Asians in Uganda? I mean, I could just list and list and list and list, you freak. Come on. The states? But the point of Interview with a Zombie, which is this YouTube that I made, was to preemptively strike out at people who were going to say these things about me, and again try to smear me so no one will listen. Of course, oh gosh, he's outside the box, people. Don't listen to this guy. Block your ears. You're too delicate to hear what he's saying, and he's an extremist, and they list all these negative words. So what I did was I had a friend of mine, an economics PhD, who had so little dignity that he was willing to dress up as a zombie. And the idea of the video is that this zombie has his own television talk show. How different from our own television. And he's interviewing me about nullification, but the point is that no matter how much evidence I give, no matter the soundness of my arguments, all he can come back with is the usual politically correct smear terms. And no matter how much I refute each one, he just keeps coming back with it each time. And so the idea now is that whenever anybody criticizes me or tries to smear me or the idea of nullification, if you look at the comments section, people are all posting the Interview with a Zombie video and saying, hey, you're a zombie, why don't you actually learn the facts? And people have no idea what just hit them. So now I'm over 90,000 views on this thing. So we are really cooking with it. So check that out. It just goes to show. So before they even had a chance to smear me, I'm already laughing at them. That has to be our approach, because they want to portray us as people with horns on our heads, right? We are enemies of society, we're terrible and mean, and again, the earth would break free of its axis and go tumbling toward the sun if our ideas were ever implemented. We can't fit ourselves into that stereotype. We have to, try and be funny. And even if you've seen the video, check out interviewwithazombie.com anyway, because I also have the bloopers now up there. The bloopers are 1,000 times funnier than the actual video. Because I found it hard to keep a straight face, because of course, off camera, he's making funny zombie faces at me. Like, how am I supposed to do this, you jerk? All right. Next thing that I want us to pledge. I will not be scammed by some politico who just happens to give a pretty speech. We are very bad at this sometimes. Oh, this seems good. All right, let's see what his record is. Let's also commit ourselves to the principle that clearly nothing of substance will change if we go to all the trouble of replacing Barack Obama and we substitute Mitt Romney. I mean, let's be honest. Nothing is going to change. And finally, I am prepared to try a new approach even if the New York Times doesn't like it. In fact, my view is the fact the New York Times doesn't like it makes it all the more fun. Right? I mean, it is priceless to see the face of Chris Matthews on MSNBC when nullification was brought up. I said to my wife, this makes it all worthwhile. Sheer terror in his eyes. That's good. It's because the media, the reason they have been so vicious toward people who, are standing up to this regime is that they are fearful that they are losing their grip over your minds.
Yep.
And I think it's time for us to justify that fear. And moreover, the last principle is, I think we can all agree, we are all tired of reacting to them. So, okay, they come up with this crazy healthcare plan, we got to run around putting out that fire. You know what? No. Forget it. You have to put out fires, but you never build anything by just putting out fires. How about we start doing things and make them react to us for a change? That is the change we can do. Thank you very much.